Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Herschell Hamilton. Thanks for being on the show, Herschell.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Herschell is the leading revitalization and commercial real estate developer in the Southeast United States. He is the guy government agencies call when they need a strategic plan in recapturing the history of neighborhoods. He serves as a board member to the various public and private entities where he leads his expertise on asset diversification, real estate, and finance. Herschell, it's a pleasure to meet you and have you on the show. I think you have a lot of skill sets that you've developed over many years now that I think a lot of the listeners need to know about. I was expressing with Herschell as I'm learning more about his business and what he does, that there's probably a lot of people that don't even know somebody like he exists to help people that are in this space. So Herschell, get us started a little bit with your background and just what you do exactly, who you help, and let's dive into to a little more detail.
Right. So as I mentioned earlier, my partner and I started our firm in 2003. So we've been around for, plus or minus 17 years. And we started our firm as a fee development company. And essentially what a fee developer is someone who develops projects on behalf of clients. My early background was in investment banking, doing public finance transactions. So I was familiar with financing big public projects, stadiums, convention centers, wastewater treatment plants, and things of that nature. And my partner, Mike Carpenter, is a licensed architect by profession, but he doesn't design. He spent his career delivering projects on behalf of clients as an owner's rep, as a construction manager, program manager, and developer. And so when we got together in 2003, we combined my project finance expertise with his project delivery expertise and set up our firm, Block Global Group. And so what we do is we develop projects on behalf of clients, and we also develop projects for our own account. Typically, we work with a team of individuals, developers, co-developers, engineers, architects, to execute projects throughout the Southeastern United States. And so it's been a really interesting and exciting ride since 2003.
So explain a little more detail just about your role, say working with someone that's going to develop a piece of property, or, maybe you can give us an example and how, what your role is in that and how detailed or how, involved are you and your team?
Right. So I'll give you an example of a project we worked on back in the mid 2000s. So we were hired by a group out of the Netherlands that had a U.S. subsidiary, and from a syndication standpoint, Whitney, you'll appreciate this. They syndicated money from investors in Germany and the Netherlands to fund projects in the United States, and so they had a U.S. subsidiary that was based in Tampa, and they had purchased a number of properties in Birmingham, and they were looking for a developer to develop those projects on their behalf. And so essentially in that situation, what we did was we worked with that company and their ownership group. We identified, for example, 3 design firms, and we had those design firms submit preliminary design concepts, and then we selected a design firm. And then we coordinated all of the pre-development work as well as the land acquisition, because in this instance, they were developing a high-rise luxury condominium project in Birmingham that overlooked the city. And they acquired an older apartment complex that had to be demoed in order to clear the site to make way for development. And so we worked with a local broker to do the land acquisition, and then all the pre-development work. We helped them select the contractor that built the project, and then we managed the project as the project manager or owner's rep over the construction period. And so what we say is we deliver services from concept to closure. And at the end of the day, we handed the guys the keys and they had a turnkey developed project.
Okay, no, that's incredible. Just to know someone like you exists in case we want to get into development, right?
That's right.
'Cause, you need somebody that's been there, done it, I think, to help you along the way, especially in development or in almost anything. But thanks for walking through that. So, who I guess is your client mostly someone who's continually doing development, or is it mostly when someone's getting started?
Well, it's a combination. For example, we have individuals who approach us that own an asset, a piece of real estate, and they say, I have an idea for how this real estate can be developed, but I'm not a developer. And so we work with individuals who find themselves in that situation. But we also work with institutions and sometimes even large development firms, for example, that have, that don't have any additional internal capacity, but they have another project that they want to advance. And so they'll engage our firm to do so. And then one of the things that we do is that we initiate projects ourselves. We aren't the type firm that, waits for people to bring opportunities to the table. We'll see an opportunity and then initiate that project. We'll get the site under control and then go out and engage, developer partners and finance partners and investor partners to work to pull a development project together. And so we've done those type of deals from, from a developer perspective, as well as, buying operating assets that, that are, that have potential for redevelopment and better positioning on the cash flow side.
You knew I was going to ask you, like, why not do it yourself? Right. If you all have this team and skill sets, and why not develop the deal and keep it for yourself?
Well, we do. And, it's really interesting. We have this adage within our firm that says you have to know when to be in a transaction and when to be in the deal. And essentially that was born out of having ridden the ups and downs of the economic cycle. For example, you don't want to be a developer long in a deal when the market turns down, like it did during the Great Recession, right?
That's right.
Um, so, so from our perspective, what we do is we look at the macroeconomic conditions and determine when is the appropriate time for us to be an owner in a deal, to have to have an ownership role and taking risk in a deal. And then there are other situations and times where people want to advance projects and we don't necessarily think the macroeconomic conditions are, most advantageous. And then we'll provide services during that period of time, development services. So it's a combination of things. And for us, it's just an evaluation of the market conditions at that time.
Are you all like in a deal where you're assisting a developer through this process? Are you all strictly fee based?
Yes. So typically, what we get people to realize is if you're doing a development deal, the most critical time is the implementation and execution phase because you pool the money from your investor partners, you've gotten your bank loan, and now it's all about execution, and time is not your friend. You have to deliver it on budget and on time. And so the most important part of the development process is the execution process. And so we get paid a professional services fee over that development period and also a success fee at the end of the project. And so that's the way we operate.
So I know you pride yourself in just the impact when you just revitalizing communities, right? But maybe you could share with a little more detail about that and just maybe what most people ignore when thinking through that as a developer.
Yeah. So a lot of work that we do is in cities. And as you know, over the last 20 years, there's been this reurbanization trend in the US. People have been moving back into cities, empty nesters coming out of the suburbs, Gen X, Y, and Z, who really like living in cities and all the things cities have to offer. I should caveat that by say pre-pandemic, there was a lot of interest in cities. But when you talk about urban areas and cities, you have a lot of interesting dynamics in those places. You have politics, you have race and culture, and being a developer, you have to manage through all of those things. And because our firm has primarily been an urban focused firm, that's worked with both public and private sector institutions to negotiate participation in projects, and worked with community-based organizations and neighborhood associations. We understand the dynamics of race and culture and politics and demographics. And that way we're able to, help and, navigate our partners through, projects in those areas. And so the other thing I would say that you really have to kind of focus on is, while there's been a lot of growth in cities, and a lot of great investment opportunities in cities. Think about Austin, think about Nashville, think about Charlotte, think about Atlanta. Well, the growth is great, but on the other hand, there's some challenges that growth creates. Essential workers are priced out of the housing market. You have income inequalities, displacement occurring in cities. And so you have to manage through all of those things and really take a lot of that into account as you plan for development in urban areas.
What about, just the importance of legacy, like working in local communities? I know you spoke to that a little bit, but I thought you could elaborate.
Yeah. So, every community has a history, and every community has, something that it's known for. And a lot of times you wind up tying your development concepts and themes to those things that those communities are really known for, or that they evolve towards. And so, so we try to tap into, that base of knowledge and make sure we understand, the history and legacies that exist in communities, and as well as, as one of my associates says, the who's and do's, the movers and shapers in any community and who's doing what, in order to make sure that, you have the goodwill of the community that you're going into in order to, to make your work in those communities as smooth as possible.
How to give a couple tips on that? I like that, the who's and do's. How do you meet somebody like that? How do you all go about approaching that community or those who's and do's like you talked about?
So, in every community, you have, you have the political structure. You have mayors and councils. You have economic development offices and economic development authorities. You have active nonprofit organizations, and then you have community-based organizations that promote different community-based programs and neighborhood associations. Well, these days, all of those entities are active, and they have been given a voice in what happens in neighborhoods and communities and even central business districts. And so what we do is we survey the territory and we find out, all the players are in any given market. And if it's a market that we're not familiar with, we may hire a local, land use attorney, for example, who has local relationships, or we may hire a local broker who has local relationships, and they can bring us to the table, in a way that, allows us to, kind of maneuver through, all of the relationships so that, we can effectively get the things done that we want to do.
Are you all using opportunity zones to, to help you all build wealth, or your clients build wealth, or not?
Well, we are exploring a number of projects within opportunity zones, but we're not opportunity zone focused. It's an interesting program that is providing, tax benefits for those investors who participate in opportunity zone funds. We have yet to do one of those deals, but, we're certainly looking at a number of them.
And how have you seen just individuals just really, build their portfolio through development? Maybe you can just provide some tips there, maybe how you all have done that, or how you see some of the best in class operate.
Right. So at the end of the day, it all starts with, a vision. Real estate is the real estate development business is really driven by creatives. When I say that, I mean people who can look at a parcel, an empty parcel, and envision something that goes there, who can look at a building that has a current use, and then who can envision an adaptive reuse, who can look at any project and say, there's a path to creating greater value on this piece of property. And so we, you know, starting out there, you work to, to cast visions and then pull a team together in order to work to capture, the essence of the vision in the form of a real estate project.
So, Herschel, what's been the hardest part of just the development business for you?
Um, that I can't say that there's a necessarily a hard part. Um, it's just, dealing with the cyclical market. For example, between my partner and I, and then the other firms that we work with, we have a very robust and experienced team from a development perspective. Um, what sometimes is challenging is just working with partners and teams to effectively get things done. For example, if you work in multiple jurisdictions like we do, um, we can take the same team, but the individuals we interact with, on the plan, for example, on the city's planning side or zoning side or legal side, or on the private side, the investors that we deal with, they may have different perspectives regarding their respective projects. And so for us, it's just managing people. That's probably the most challenging aspect of it, because if you think about the nuts and bolts of real estate, um, capital can be syndicated. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they made the statement that the world is awash in capital, and I think what they meant was that globally there's so much money looking for real estate opportunities, uh, that money in this day and age is really not the challenge. The challenge is finding good projects that pencil. And when I say pencil, that you anticipate can make a profit in the volatile environment that exists. And then once you identify those properties, delivering on, executing on a development plan, whether you buy an apartment complex and renovate it and then populate it. Because in the development world, one of the things that I always tell people that they have to realize is when you develop a piece of property, you spend money first before you make money. And what I mean by that is you get the property under control, you do due diligence, you spend a bunch of money before you even know you're going to close on the property. You have to do all your performance and assessments and then make a determination. And then the development and construction period, is a 12 to 18 month period. So all this time, 12 to 24 months of pre-development, you are spending money. And then when you bring that asset online, you have to lease it up before you start making money, or before you start selling units, to recoup the money that you spent. And so, so in addition, so managing people, but also the reality that the development process is a long lead time process, and you spend money before you even begin to make money.
Are there a couple quick things you could tell us how you've learned to manage people well? I mean, completely understand. I mean, that's one of the hardest parts of business, right? Is
Right.
managing people, whether inside the company or organization or outside as well. And like you said, you're in so many different jurisdictions. I can only imagine that difficulty. And you're having to teach your team or ensure they know how to deal with all these people too.
Right.
How have you done that? Just quickly.
Well, I think it starts with first giving everybody a voice, and working to be patient as people express themselves. And so we always go in that way, but what we're problem solving focused. We deliver solutions. I laughed because I heard my partner having a conversation with an architect once, around a project that had some challenges, and what he said to the guy was, how we got to this point is irrelevant. What we need to do now is determine the things we need to solve in order to advance the ball and move this thing forward. And so, you always run into challenges, and that's what we tell our teams. You're always going to run into challenges, but how do the mastery is, how do you manage through those periods of time and manage through those challenges? And we start with giving people a voice, taking the time and working on our level of patience to listen to what people have to say, but then being solution oriented. So when there's a challenge, when there's a problem, we don't just put the problem on the table. We come to the table and talk about the problem and then put potential solutions on the table. And so that's the way we most effectively manage the challenges of, working with individuals and people in situations.
How do you prepare for a downturn? Whether you are, just the fee side, you're just helping someone, or you're in the deal,
Right.
either one. Just provide some highlights on, type of downturn or that you're preparing for, or, obviously the next question is going to be, what do you predict to happen in the real estate market in the next 6 to 12 months, right? But speak to, how you're preparing for that, from your line of work.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, during the last downturn, or the Great Recession, which is the recession prior to this coronavirus-induced recession, um, you could pretty much see the writing on the wall. When I say that, I mean, because if you're in the business, everybody starts getting into the business. Anybody you talk to on the corner says, I'm in the real estate business, I'm doing a development deal. So that's like the first sign. But then you begin to see also, the broader economic signs, like capital is flowing, banks are lax on their requirements. It's easy to get loans. You look at the volume of outstanding loans that exist in any particular segment of the marketplace. And so you start to see signs that the market may be overdone. And typically what you try to do at that time is look at the projects you have and then make contingencies. For example, if I'm a developer and I'm developing in what I consider a challenging period in the marketplace, I probably build more contingencies into my development budget. Because if the market turns down, for example, if commodity prices increase during this development period, if anything unforeseen happens, you may be able to buy your way out of the process, or even have a reserve in place that gives you more staying power than the next guy. So as it relates to, on a going forward basis, how do we prepare for, what we think may be the next economic cycle? We just are cautious, as I say, back to our adage, you have to know when to be in the transaction and when to be in the deal. When you see the preponderance of our projects trend from development to fee development, for example, for us, that's an indication that we're concerned that the market may be a little too frothy and may be subject to a downturn. The thing that's interesting about the market these days is that interest rates are so low and capital is readily available. The Federal Reserve has indicated, for example, that they don't plan to raise rates over the next, 3 or 4 years. And so a lot of people are taking that as a sign to actively step into the marketplace from an asset ownership standpoint, be it home ownership or investment properties. And so we just have to be careful because as we have seen during this coronavirus turn down, retail was impacted by the internet previously, but then with the coronavirus, it was, devastated. The hospitality industry the same way. Some of those things are very difficult to anticipate. I wish I had a crystal ball that would tell me, what would cause the next downturn. Because, for example, with the current one that we're going through, we knew the market was frothy, but what you don't know is what's going to be the trigger that causes the market to turn down.
Right.
And in this instance, literally, you could not have told me it would be a global pandemic that would decimate the hospitality and retail and commercial office market as well. It's but it's really interesting to see it unfold.
So what do you expect over the next 6 to 12 months, or how are you all, are you operating any differently now than say you were a year ago, or is it more just on the development side you're helping, or are you trying to take ownership right now as well?
Yeah, so we're still looking at opportunities in markets. We're comfortable with owner for example, we're comfortable with commercial office assets where the tenants have ownership interest, or the owners are tenants. I guess I could say that in a different way, because they are committing to the long term occupy those assets. And you know, I think in the market's an active and robust market right now, and so it has been moving forward fairly aggressively. Those sectors that are now strong sectors, data centers, logistics and warehousing, multifamily, especially suburban multifamily, um, you know, urban multifamily still holding on, but it's being supported by the dollars that are coming out of the federal government for, rent support, for example. And so, when you start to see those things, you start to watch the metrics in those markets. So long story short, we feel comfortable with the market over the next 6 to 12 months, that opportunities will continue to present themselves. You just have to be much more cautious in your selection process because, if you're a developer, the development cycle is a 2 to 3 year cycle, which means if I start a project today, it won't be finished, until 24 or 36 months from now. And so, what is the market going to look like at the time? So you really have to be comfortable that the product that you're delivering is going to be viable 2 to 3 years from now, because that's when you're going to be delivering that product in the marketplace. And so we're primarily working on multifamily projects these days from a development perspective, and we're comfortable that that market is still strong and resilient as we speak, I should say.
What are a couple of daily habits or any daily habits that you have that you're disciplined about that have helped you achieve success?
Um, I think it's just a function of, for me, it's like a daily routine. Um, you know, checking in with our partners to get a sense of, to find out what they see and what they're hearing and what they're doing. Because, what you always have to realize is that, no individual knows everything. And, as a developer, we don't know everything. And so we do a lot of, touching base. So every morning when I wake up, I have a series of calls that I make just to, touch base with some of our partners and associates to make sure I'm connected to what's going on in those respective markets. And then from a company perspective, it's, we have financial metrics and financial bogeys and risk tolerances that we like to manage. And so it's a function of looking at, our internal financial landscape and saying, are we too far out on the risk curve? How much capital do we have deployed? If we want to do this project, we really need to bring in a partner so we can manage risk better. And so those are the things that we, that at least that I do that I think are really important on a daily basis.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
um, good finding good partners and creating a solid team of people to work with. Because it goes back to what I said just a few minutes ago. No one individual knows everything. And if you have a solid team that covers all the bases, it just puts you in a position where, you don't miss any blind spots, or it's harder to miss blind spots. For example, I described my, the relationship with my partner and how we started our firm. I mean, he is an expert in project delivery and he lives and breathes it. Well, my strong suit is on the creative side. I can negotiate deals. I can get us into any deal. But it's his job to get us out. And when I say get us out, he's got to execute us out, And so, symbiotic relationships, mutually beneficial, relationships with internally, because you have to complement one another. And so I think the thing that has led to my success is the ability to find good team members that complement one another, whose skills together are, are much greater than any individual. And we work well together and execute on projects very well together.
Good answer. Finding good partners is the number one thing, and I would agree completely. You can't know everything, right? Whether it's development or whether it's owning a coffee shop, you need partners who have been there and done that, right? So, how do you like to give back?
Well, so I'm involved in a number of philanthropic organizations. My wife and I and a number of community members created an organization called a Ballard House Project years ago to restore a historic building in Birmingham Civil Rights District. And the restoration is one thing, but the reprogramming of the building is a thing that's been really special for us. Um, we host workshops, community gatherings, community conversations. We do oral histories in an effort to really help people understand the history of the community. Because a lot of times, if you think about the world today, there's a lot of dissension in the world, and it's because people don't know one another. And so what we do is we act and actively work through this organization to help people learn about the history in Birmingham, and we hope to do it in other cities as well. The history of all the people in the community, because everybody, if you think of any community, everybody across socioeconomic and racial spectrums has contributed to the growth and development of the community. And so as people learn about people, other people's historic contributions, it gives them a greater appreciation for their neighbors and their coworkers and the people that they work with. And so that's one of the main ways we give back. And then otherwise, we like to work with young people within our company to help them understand and learn the real estate business, because we think the ownership of assets is a way to build wealth. And we really like working with young people who are interested in, in this arena. I recently spoke to a group of young men in Birmingham who have an interest in the business. And, I just make myself readily available to them, anything that I can do, because so many people helped me along the way. I just always wanted to be in a position to help others. And so that's that.
Herschell, grateful for your time and just being willing to share about what you do and just open the eyes of the listeners and myself, just to someone like you that's in the business that can help us complete a development successfully. I know initially looking on, starting a development company or thinking about developing a project can be pretty overwhelming, and can give you just a great deal of confidence to have somebody like you and your team on our team when looking at something like that. But also just managing people and how you all have done that, and finding good partners and the importance of that. Appreciate that. Share with the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Yeah. So the best way to reach out to me is LinkedIn. Our company Block Global Group has a LinkedIn page, and then I have a personal LinkedIn page, Herschell Hamilton. So that's the best way to get in contact with me. I have become much more active in using LinkedIn, and I find it to be a really resourceful tool.
Awesome, Herschell.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.